you have unlearned to trust yourself, it will take time. What you do is that you take small decisions. Initially, take decisions that you dare to take. Take small decisions, no matter what, but take decisions. Be decisive, and then just remind yourself that it's okay to trust yourself. It feels scary, but in the end, when you start hearing yourself, that voice, and when you start trusting your own choices, you will suddenly realize that you do have all the truth. And that doesn't mean that you will never regret your choices, but it's very different. If you regret your own choice because you made a decision based on, whatever circumstances were then, whoever you were, versus you regret something that you did because the society pushed you to do that.
Welcome my guest, Kristina Mand-Lakhiani. She's the co-founder of Mindvalley, the world's most powerful life transformational platform with an ever-growing 20 million strong following. She is a best-selling author, international speaker, entrepreneur, artist, and philanthropist based in Estonia. As an author of transformational programs, 7 Days to Happiness, Live by Your Own Rules, 10 Questions for Self-Love, and From Awesome to Flawesome, Kristina has touched the lives of over 20,000 students with wisdom, life hacks, and healthy habit-building formulas curated and inspired by her 20 years in the personal growth industry. Her mission is to put authenticity, happiness, and self-love back on the menu for the individual and the collective. Her first book, Becoming Flawesome, published by Hay House in July 2023, instantaneously became a #1 bestseller in various categories on the Wall Street Journal, US Today, Amazon, and Barnes & Noble. In her book, Kristina shares her own journey from being on the top of personal growth empire like Mindvalley to stepping aside, consciously uncoupling from her husband, and walking her path towards being more honest with herself. All right, I am so honored to welcome on the show Kristina Mand-Lakhiani. Thank you so much for being here. As I was mentioning, I feel like we somehow know each other already because I'm so familiar with Mindvalley. I've gone through the courses myself, and also I know a lot of people that speak for Mindvalley, as I was touching on, that have been on the show before. So I'm very familiar, and so I'm just so honored to share the space with one of the co-founders, Kristina. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Erica, so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to dive in this conversation because it's actually one of my most favorite topics to talk about, and that is coming home to yourself, being your authentic self, and really embodying and truly loving yourself for who you are, not needing to be anything other than yourself, and really discovering what that is, right? So we'll go into the conversation, but first I want to know, since you, as far as I know your story, you didn't exactly plan to get in the personal development space and leading one of the most powerful platforms, as we mentioned, Mindvalley. So how did you actually get into this space? If you could kind of share part of your journey.
Yeah, I like to say that I ended up in Mindvalley and in personal growth by accident and reluctantly, probably. I was brought up in Estonia, in post-Soviet Estonia in the 90s. So it was exactly after the fall of that huge country. And my career was, I started my career in the government, mostly because that was the that was something that we post-Soviet people dreamt of. So just for the context, doing business wasn't legal. And personal growth is until now frowned upon, or any kind of anything to do with actually your mental well-being. It's just the country where I was brought up. So it wasn't on the table, not because I wasn't interested, it just wasn't part of my reality. How I ended up in Mindvalley and in personal growth is that I got married at the age of 25 to Vision, and I moved to New York where he lived, which I think is natural for a wife to follow her husband. Maybe not so natural, maybe it's 50-50, but I followed him. And in New York, I didn't have a visa to work. I had a social visa, so I just started helping Vishen with his startup then, Mindvalley. It was 2003. And that's how I ended up in personal growth and in business, the two things which were never part of my reality.
That's so interesting to think like where you're at now and where you came from. And it must be so different for your family. I didn't even think to ask this, but I'm curious. What did your family think of it when you started to kind of follow that track? Were they like, this is not the way you're supposed, like, this is not the direction you should go? Did they kind of frown upon it or?
Well, Soviet Union had collapsed by then. It was in 92 or 91, I don't remember right now. And so many things changed overnight, and we had to build a new country. So, of course, speaking now of something which happened so far, so long time ago, it seems like it's a different planet. But if you come to Estonia right now, it's very advanced. So, that for that to happen, for that change to happen from Soviet society to a completely modern contemporary society, a lot of things started falling apart and changing very quickly. So people of my parents' age, a lot of them suffered. So literally, people reacted in two ways. Some of them adapted and enjoyed the change because the change also brought the opportunity to express yourself, to be true to your values, and not to have to play by the rules of the society, and very restrictive society at that. And another half actually suffered because they were used to life where all decisions were taken for you. So considering that huge change, I don't think people had any expectations at that time. You just did what you could do. You know, when it's chaos, then people survive in different ways. So I don't think anybody had any issues. Of course, a lot of people uh, they moved abroad. I didn't move abroad because I wanted a better life. I moved abroad because I was married.
Right.
And my parents have always been supportive of me. If had I stayed with government career, then yes, maybe there would have been some opinions because government still has, no matter which country you take, it has its very strict rules, and you can't do
Yeah.
certain things. But I had given up that path, and I was starting from scratch, and I was 25. You know, you still are very hopeful and and not as jaded and wary, and you still believe. You know, optimism is a blessing in this age.
Absolutely. It's so true. Well, talking about, so your book, Becoming Flawesome, we'll go into the reasoning for your word that you chose for the book. But I imagine for somebody to speak about authenticity and returning home to yourself and really embodying who you are, I imagine your path, which you've kind of shared, there is an opposite for you where you didn't feel you were living in alignment with your true authentic self. So can you kind of share the realization that you weren't really living your truth, if you want to say, or in alignment with who you truly were, or even knowing who you truly were? Can you kind of share that journey?
You know, that's the irony of it. It's not like I didn't live my truth. I still, uh, I did have certain values and beliefs, and I did follow my heart. I left my career, my successful career in Estonia, and moved to a completely different world, US. So I can't say that I wasn't following my heart, or I was um, very stuck in the expectations of society. But with that said, still there was this feeling that it's not 100% what I want, that I follow some kind of rules nevertheless. And for me, the realization happened at the age about 40. And you could say it's midlife crisis, and probably that's what specialists would say.
Right.
That's when you start realizing that, you know, time is linear and it's moving one way, and you take kind of uh, you just look back at your life and think what you have accomplished. And I had accomplished a lot by the age of 40. And a lot of people would say that I was an inspiration to them. And I lived a very, very remarkably, um, the life I could brag about, you know, and show off. But still, I wasn't feeling very happy and content. And that was the problem. But more than that, the problem was that I felt that I didn't have the right to not feel happy and content. How dare you? You know, you have everything that other people dream of, and here you are saying that you are not content. So that internal conflict was the thing that pushed me on the path to ask myself, so what's wrong? What's happening? Why am I not happy? So you asked me about the word flawsome. I didn't find it; it found me. And I know that we use the word authenticity quite a bit in the book, but I'm trying to use it as little as I can nowadays, because it comes with so much baggage. And truly, it's not about authenticity, it's about your relationship with yourself.
Mm.
And your relationship with yourself, if you take just the core of that, your relationship with yourself, then everything else becomes secondary. Do you follow those society's rule or not? Are you authentic or not? Are you true to yourself or not? Ultimately, it all comes down to this one thing. How is your relationship with yourself? And my relationship with me was complicated,
Mm.
because I kind of did the right things, but I didn't feel happy. And I felt ashamed for not feeling happy.
That's something I think we need to dig a little deeper into, because I think a lot of people shame away how they feel because, like you said, like, oh, I'm successful. Oh, I have great kids. I have a great marriage. Like, I have all these things, right? And on the outside, it looks beautiful to everybody. But that feeling of uneasiness and that, if you want to say a disconnect, like, why am I not more fulfilled when I have all this? And I think a lot of people do struggle with that, but they shame away that feeling. So what would
Yeah,
you say? What would you be your advice on that?
I would take a part of the blame, because I'm a co-founder of one of the biggest companies in the industry of personal growth and transformation, and that industry had actually also dug the hole a little deeper,
Mm.
because we do live in an environment where we are shamed for not being grateful for what we have. You know how like we all have problems, we all suffer, but then we are reminded constantly, but look at all the things that you could be grateful for. So it's really an interesting environment where we find ourselves, because on one side, we do want to live an extraordinary life. And of course, the industry that I've helped building, personal growth and transformation, of course, it contributes to people learning how to do that and giving the tools and the skills and the mindset and everything, the belief system. But on the other hand, it's also a little bit tyrannical, because with all of that comes also a new set of dogma. How dare you feel bad? Be grateful. First world problems. Uh, all the things. Good vibes only.
Mm.
Only
Mm.
positive. So it is. I think it all comes down to one very simple rule that I try to follow: that there are no absolutes in life, and life is a dance, it's not a military march. So uh, yes, you have to be positive and optimistic, but you can't feel bad if you're not.
Right. And there, I know a lot of people have heard this term is toxic positivity, is living in this state of like everything needs to be positive. It's funny because I actually just saw a friend share the other day on social media. He's like, I'm usually positive when I post, but this is going on. And I said to him, I'm like, you don't need to show up perfect all the time. You don't need to be positive all the time. Like, be human. Like, it's okay to share what's going on if you feel you want to be vulnerable and share. But I don't think we need to show up perfect all the time. That's the problem, if anything, is that people think like, oh, I can't show up unless I'm perfect. And so it puts us through this cycle of needing to always perfect ourselves, if you want to say.
I would actually ask or invite listeners to turn the focus away from showing up to the world and turn the focus onto yourself, because it doesn't really matter how you show up to the world. If who am I to say how you are to show up to the world? Maybe that's your brand. Maybe being a
Right.
Barbie doll is, for someone that's how they want to build their business. It's fine. I also don't want to tyrannize people with vulnerability and rawness and being real. What matters is, do you dare to show up to yourself, being messy, being
Mm.
imperfect? That's the problem. We show to the world what we would like to believe of ourselves. It's not that People usually know that I'm putting up a face. Let me give you maybe a more practical example. I started my my path as an author years ago as a person who was speaking about happiness, because I researched that. I was very curious. I like happiness. Happiness is such an undervalued and important skill. So I started teaching about happiness. And of course, there were days when I wasn't feeling happy, but I would still have to go on stage. As a professional, you will understand me. As a professional, as a speaker, as an author, if you don't feel like it, you still go on stage. You get your resourceful state and you do what you're supposed to do. Because you don't just say, I'm not doing it because I don't feel like it.
Mm.
So there is a space to putting up the facade and to playing the game. The question is not how you show yourself to the world. The question is how you show yourself to yourself. And when people show their perfect facades on internet, it's not that they know that they're messed up, but they want everybody to see a different picture. No, that's what they want to see about themselves.
Mm.
And the world is just there to validate their own opinion about ourselves. We think that we perform for the world, but we perform for ourselves. And all we need out of the world is just the applause. It's like, you know, just the audience, just validate what I think about myself. So the problem with for the people who can't let their hair down, the problem is not how the world will take them. The problem is that they are not ready to take them.
Mm. So to just unpack that a little bit more, if somebody is doing it for that external validation to be seen a certain way, how do they then turn on themselves and like actually, is it coming from a healthy place? Like I want to show up like this because this is how I value myself and this is what I expect of myself. But it comes from a healthy place. Like how do we discern the difference?
Well, in my book, I talk about the different social roles we play. It's actually a branch of theory from psychology, social roles, and it's a natural part of our contemporary life. I mean, probably in the old days, we also had different social roles. We play different social roles, and different social roles would come with different scripts and with different scenarios and with different, even different masks and costumes. And it's natural when you come to work, you put on your professional social role. When you come home, you hopefully take it off. And you hopefully talk to your children not the same way you talk to your colleagues, and you don't talk to your colleagues the way you talk to your children. So this is okay. The problem happens when our social roles start conflicting or contradicting. An example would be when I was on a book tour with my kids for 5 weeks. So I was in two roles simultaneously, as an author and a professional, and as a mother to my children. So my relationship with my children and my work has more or less stabilized, but sometimes you do have these conflicting situations where you, as a professional, and you, as, let's say, a parent or a friend or a lover, have to run different scripts. Which of the roles are you going to prioritize? Well, social roles theory says that we prioritize the role which is more valued by society, and the role which is more valued by society is probably the role which comes with such badges of honor as ambition, authority, money, success. So, as a woman entrepreneur, a mompreneur, a mother who is also entrepreneur, I know if mother in me and entrepreneur in me are in conflict, I'm much more naturally going to lean towards showing up as an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
because this is a socially more valuable role. So when these conflicts happen, and they happen to people, the question is, how do you live with yourself? Which of the roles will you prioritize? How do you feel about the role which you deprioritize? Do you feel you're a bad mother? That's where the conflict creeps in. And that's where you start betraying yourself. So it's really not the question of how do you show up to the world. It's a question, how do you feel about yourself when you take off the mask, you take off your costume, you put down your script, you are left alone with yourself. What do you feel then? Are
Hmm.
you still in conflict?
Hmm. And that goes to the topic that I personally love to talk about is self-acceptance. And I believe personally that self-acceptance is the pathway to self-love, because if you cannot accept yourself as you are now, the totality that has made you who you are today, how do you then love yourself? You have to accept all parts of you, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, whatever it may be. It's like you are a totality of what has made you who you are today. And so I know you talk about this too, is like if we want to talk about personal development, if we want to become something, like the reason why a lot of us seek personal development is because we desire to strive for a better version of who we are. Like what can we learn to improve ourselves? At least that's my personal intent with it, is just to become a better person and learn more, and how could I show up better. And so I know that for me to become better, I need to accept where I am. And you speak heavily on this. And I think this is so important to drill home, because I think that's really the problem with, I believe, at least this has been my path, is I didn't accept everything that brought me to where I was. And so I would reject parts of myself. So what
Mm.
can you say to that? Because I think this is important to drill home.
I'll give a very short answer first. I just today I heard, yeah, I heard one of the authors saying a very wonderful idea. Perfection is not the goal; progress is the goal. And
Yes.
that's where we get lost very often. We think that that what we're going for is perfection, forgetting that. Uh, well, it's a really unattainable goal, the perfection. Now, when it comes to acceptance, I think the problem starts actually one step before. The problem is that we don't even know ourselves.
Right.
So how can you accept something that you don't know? Sometimes we think that, oh, this is what I am, and I'm not willing to accept that. For example, I'm undisciplined, I'm lazy, I'm I don't know what not, without realizing that these are symptoms of something deeper. And very often, since we don't have the very strong habit of introspection and staying with ourselves and looking inside, we very often don't understand ourselves very well. We see the surface, the superficial reactions. I'm emotional, I'm passionate, whatever. But that usually comes with certain values and with certain reasons why we are the way we are. So when I talk about acceptance, it's not about like, oh yeah, I smoke, so what? Let me accept myself the way I am.
Right.
No, you don't smoke. You smoke is a superficial behavior. It's a pattern which comes from you having an addictable personality. Now, this is something to accept. And very often, because we don't look deeper, we don't make a distinction between the intrinsic part of you, something that you can't get rid of. It's just like your height, like your hair color or eye color. Of course, hair you can
Right.
dye, and just the patterns which are deriving from those intrinsic parts of ourselves. So when I talk about acceptance, I talk about accepting you the way you are, something which is just inborn with you. And I'm not talking about accepting, let's say, our quirks, which maybe we learned and which are maybe destructive to us. And yeah, I'll probably just take a pause here because I feel that you want to ask something.
No, it's so true. When you say, like, for example, uh, I'm trying to think of one thing that I struggled with, melasma. I have melasma, so I cover it up. But I used to have really unhealthy, like, I did not accept that part of me, so I hated it, right? And so now I accept that this is something that I have. And yes, I could cover it with makeup, but I've learned to, if you want to say, like, I accept it, and I'm doing my best to lighten it and cover it, but it's not something I hate away now. And so I
Mm.
think, like you said, it's accepting just what, either like what we were born with. For example, your height, like you can't change it. And I think a lot of people just constantly reject those things they hate about themselves. And that's when it becomes a very unhealthy thing. Like, how could you love something that you reject? So
It's
yeah.
the good analogy and the bar to set for yourself is a relationship with someone that you love dearly and effortlessly. So if you think of your relationship with yourself like a relationship with anyone, let's say a child, because child is the easiest person to love unconditionally and effortlessly, then it starts being clear. You don't like your child, you don't love your child unconditionally. But if my child had slightly lighter hair and was a little taller and maybe a little more muscular, then I'd love that child more. You would probably laugh at that idea, yet that's what we do to ourselves. We give ourselves conditions. That's the point of unconditional love. You don't love yourself despite your imperfections, but with them, and very often because of them, because they make you unique. And yes, it is a little hard because we've been brought up in an environment which requires perfection when it comes to beauty. Then unfortunately it's very hard on women, very hard on aging women. It is hard to learn to love yourself unconditionally, but we don't have to start with our appearances, because this is so, this is sometimes such a journey. We can start with just us as a personality, and then maybe our folds and flaps and gray hair and wrinkles and whatnot will be easier to love if we train on things which
Absolutely.
which are a little bit deeper and more intrinsic to us.
Yeah, and talking about something that the story I used to say about myself is that I was such a bad speaker. And then I obviously worked on that. And part of me, I believe it's more my subconscious, was the reason I wanted to start a podcast, is to prove myself wrong. And 4.5 years later, I'm still doing this darn thing, and it's great. And because it's helped me build the confidence that my once, if you want to say, fault about myself is now my strength. It's something that I'm comfortable using and able to really step into, because I don't need to judge it anymore. It's more like, this is something I'm working at that now I get to use to spread messages across the world. So I believe that a lot of and as they say, like, sometimes your biggest pain could be your biggest purpose. It's kind of the same thing. Your biggest weakness could then be your biggest strength, as long as you learn to, again, stop rejecting it and pushing it away, and more take a look at it and question it and have curiosity. Why do I feel this way about this?
Mm. Yeah,
So,
and when it comes to speaking, it's such an interesting topic because, of course, I could be a little bit professionally deformed because I've seen too many speakers.
oh
But
yes,
I
absolutely.
can't imagine. I can't imagine that anybody is really a bad speaker. You can think of any person that you've seen on stage that you didn't enjoy on stage, and imagine that that person also could have a really exciting conversation, maybe one on one, right? So the question is, what is it that makes you not perform on stage? Not so much why you're a bad speaker, and very often. You, we put those umbrella terms on ourselves. I'm a bad speaker, I'm lousy, I'm lazy, I'm stupid, I'm undisciplined, without
Yeah.
looking deeper into what makes us behave the way we do. And we show up as if we can't speak on stage, as if we can't speak on in front of people. Sometimes it's something so much deeper for a lot of speakers that I've seen. And I've seen people become speakers. I mean, I've been in this industry for 20 years,
Yeah.
and I've seen people you know, all I can tell you that those that we call good speakers are just really well trained people. A
Absolutely.
lot of the speakers had other issues, much deeper issues. They were not ready with their message. They had not sorted out their relationship with themselves. That shyness or fear was coming very often from them just not being ready with their message. Sometimes it's just lack of training. Sometimes it's inability to work with your fear. But I literally in 20 years I haven't seen a bad speaker.
Right, right. No, I know for myself personally, it came from, when I say a bad speaker, it was more like I don't formulate my words correctly, or I say the incorrect thing, I'm stupid. And then again, peeling the layer more, where did that come from? Right? Because again, a lot of our fears or insecurities come from something. It's rooted in something. So with the awareness, as we talked about, which is the key foundation to any change, because we need to know where we're at, with the awareness, I knew where that stemmed from, and then I was able to address the root, opposed to just living the story on repeat and not fixing it, because you can't change what you can't see, right? So yeah, I think that with those things that we again, that we reject or shame, it's like there's a reason. It's there for a reason, and we need to look under the layers and gain awareness, like, where is this coming from, so I can then love on that part of me, per se. And I know one of the things, as I was digging through your book, I mean, there's so many vast topics that you talk about in the book, and it's all basically leading back to the path to yourself, and loving you for who you are. One of those things you talk about is the difference between self-care and self-love. So since we're talking about self-love a little bit, can you kind of explain? Because I think some people think by doing self-care practices, that's them loving themselves, but they're two different things.
It's yeah, you're touching on such a big topic that
Mhm.
I think if we don't go deeper into that, it might be a little unjust to the idea. But I guess a very simple analogy, and I like analogies, would be: do you see the difference between faith in God and their religious ritual? Very often, if we take religion, and maybe I'm threading on thin ice, but if we take religion, the essence of any religion is actually connection to higher power, God, or whatever that religion particularly believes. And because a lot of religions have very ancient roots, because it was sometimes hard to explain it to people who are uneducated, a lot of rituals were added to that feeling of the spiritual idea of faith, so that people could make a shortcut. You do a certain ritual, and then you feel that you're doing something for the connection with God. I'll go a little bit maybe dramatic, but if you think of primitive religions that believed in sacrifice, they would bring a sacrifice to God, to make that act, to feel that you're doing something to connect to God, or you confess your sins so that you feel that I'm becoming a better person, so that I have. So very often, if we can't explain something because it's intangible and it's so complex, we give it a ritual because it's easier to follow a ritual, and you feel better about that. When you do meditation, and I've taught meditation for a long time, very often people ask when they learn to meditate, how can I say that I'm really on alpha level, or let's say
Mhm.
theta level? It's because you can't tell unless you have EEG attached to your to your head, and then the machine will show you that, yeah, your brain waves have slowed down, you're going deeper. So because people very often don't trust themselves, they rely on rituals, and they want to know that, okay, while I can't feel that I'm meditating, but I know that if I count, let's say, from 100 back to 1, I'll be definitely in a deep level of mind, and I'll be meditating. So very often we create those shortcuts to just make sure that we're doing the right thing. And the same happens, I believe, with self-love and self-care. Since self-love is intangible, it's a relationship in essence, and it's hard to make sure that I'm doing it right. We prefer a shortcut, a ritual. Self-care is a ritual. Surely, if I take care of myself, I must love myself.
Mm.
So another analogy would be, love between a man and a woman. We have a ritual of marriage to show to the rest of the world that, hey, this man and this woman love each other. And but is love in the marriage? Is love
Mm.
in dates? Is love in sex? Or love is something intangible? Is this connection, is this relationship between a man and woman something, or let's say two women or two men, it doesn't matter. The romantic love, it's not in rituals that come with it. Sometimes you feel love for a person with whom you don't even get to talk a lot. So we understand that in a relationship with other people, but when it comes to relationship with yourself, you're always with yourself. How can you make sure that you truly have a good relationship with yourself? So unfortunately, uh, self-care rituals very often become a shortcut and a slippery slope, and sometimes even the reverse of self-love. Because you see, yes, if you love yourself, you're very likely going to take care of yourself. That's natural. But
Right.
just because you take care of yourself is not a guarantee that you love yourself. And there are so many people who take perfect care of themselves, but they can't stand themselves.
And so how do you believe we really get to a true, authentic self-love, to really love ourselves? A loaded
You
question.
practice. It's like any relationship. How do you create a good, loving connection and bond? It takes time. It requires trust. It requires some kind of honesty, presence, dedication, commitment, not taking people for granted. The same with yourself. It takes time. If your relationship with yourself at this moment is messy, then most likely you will need some patience to build it back to normal, to healthy. How do you know? Usually, usually uh, we know how much we love someone in the hard times, in the difficult times, when they're trying, when they make you angry. That's when you know. If you're
That's
willing to
true.
forgive, if you're willing to give the benefit of a doubt, to have patience, to give another chance, then very likely that person is important to you. Do you have the same relationship with yourself? When you deem yourself a bad speaker, do you do you discipline yourself back into becoming a good speaker? Or imagine if you were giving that feedback to someone that you truly love. Most likely you would say, no, there's nothing wrong with you. Maybe you just, you were not in the good space, or maybe you were not ready, or maybe, that wasn't your audience. I've given bad speeches. Do I call myself a bad speaker? I've gotten really horrible feedback sometimes. But if you love yourself, you will not you will not use that failure as a chance to break yourself and to shame yourself and to make yourself feel even worse. It's like stabbing a wound once again. You will probably have some patience, some faith, right? And that's the difference between self-love and merely bearing yourself and doing all the right things.
Yeah, that's so true. The difference is giving yourself grace, forgiveness, and allowing yourself to feel what you feel and experiencing that, and not, again, I keep on using the word, I feel like yeah, on repeat, but rejecting those feelings and what is coming up for you. Instead, maybe questioning again, being curious, like, why do I feel this way? Like, what did this one incident, this one experience, this is not defining who I am. It's an experience. It's an event,
And
and
very often there's a reason why things happen, it's there's in psychology there's this one theory which I don't remember the name of, but the difference, I'll simplify it. So those who know psychology, I'm sorry, sorry for being too simple, but to simplify it, it says this, that the difference between optimistic and pessimistic outlook into the world is that when something happens to you, who do you attribute the error to? Is it because and do you generalize the situation? Do you make these conclusions that, okay, I do a test, I fail the test. Is it because I'm dumb and, I'm always failing the test? Or is it because, maybe I didn't study enough? Maybe I got the very, very hard questions. Maybe I was, I didn't sleep enough. I didn't have a rest. So the difference, literally the difference between people who are optimistic and pessimistic is in the way they treat themselves. They interpret the events that happen to them in their lives. And yes, I know there's a tendency. There will be people who will be questioning. Oh, but then in that case, I'll be lying in bed and saying, I'm good the way I am. Take the world, take me the way I am. I won't grow. We very often we are critical to ourselves, not because we like it, but because we believe that this is the necessary ingredient for growth and transformation, because that's the world in which we've been brought up. We're brought up in the world which equates punishment to growth and transformation. We believe in growth through fear, through, through discipline, through hard work. We don't believe in growth through encouragement, through joy, through pleasure. So because we don't believe in that, we are afraid that if I'm too kind to myself, I won't grow. But it's another very deep topic. What I want to say is that very often that kind of fear and punishment strategy leads to us being too scared to challenge ourselves.
Mm.
That's the biggest bane of all perfectionists. We're so hard on ourselves and on the world that rather than failing, we just won't even try. And that's what I've suffered from a lot. If you can be kind to yourself, you will discover that you have so much more courage to challenge yourself.
That's such a great topic to talk about, because I know I've heard you talk about like the dark side of personal growth or personal transformation, self improvement. Is that what is the reason we're seeking it, right? Why are we going after personal growth? And the dark side is kind of what you're explaining. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's so prevailing. It's almost scary. We are only allowed to learn through failure until we reach school, and somehow in grade one, failure becomes unacceptable.
Hmm.
It's called the red marker technique. Again, I'm simplifying. When the teacher gets you write an essay, the teacher takes the red marker and points out everything where you were wrong, everything which is weak, which is bad, and then we focus on correcting our mistakes. That's the predominant paradigm of our society. If you want to succeed, if you want to become professional, you have to work on your mistakes. You have to work on your weaknesses. Now, a different paradigm is the green marker technique, where the same essay, the teacher picks up your essay and marks all the places where you did well, where you were good, and says, work on those things because you're strong here.
Hmm.
Imagine how your life would turn out if rather than spending all this time on the things that you were bad in, you spent all that time on the things that you were really good at. It would have been a very different, probably very different scenario. But the problem with our society is that we do not believe that that leads to professionalism, success. We're afraid. We're afraid that if I do what I like, what I love, what I'm good at, and won't work on all those bad things that I'm bad at, then that means I won't be a success.
Hmm. That's such an interesting topic, and I think a lot of people should kind of self reflect on that. Is what are you focusing on? Like, are you trying to focus on improving all the bad things about yourself? Or are you focusing on your strengths and improving that, and maybe using that as the thing you're leaning towards? I think that's a good thing to reflect on. Anybody thinking, but what is your what is your opinion on, being that you, of course, have a platform, one of the biggest in personal development? What have you seen? Like, if you could, what is your take on people that go after personal development, and what is a better reframe on why they're seeking that? I don't know if that's clear in how I'm asking that question, but
I wouldn't be able to generalize, of course, because there's so many different stories and so different paths why people come to personal growth. And of course, there's a lot of that tendency um, to move towards the idea or the vision of the perfect self, which the other side of the coin is that, of course, it means that there is something imperfect which needs to be fixed, and that's of course not the fault of the people who slide into that idea, because the industry is built this way, marketing is built this way, entertainment, news, everything is built this way. If you look at any marketing pitch, and I started in marketing, so I know how it works. You have to talk about the pain, you have to draw the scenario. So that's kind of the way the world functions, and that's why we buy into it, because that environment shapes our belief about the world. And the way belief works is that if you believe in something, that's what you're going to see. That's what you're going to notice. You're going to notice the proof of whatever you believe. So if you believe that for you to succeed, you need to work hard, work on your weaknesses, sacrifice something, And that's the story that we are told everywhere, in movies, in books, everywhere.
Right.
The story from rags to riches, through all the obstacles, despite everything. So naturally we buy into that story. Not only do we buy into that story, we see the proof of that story, and we do not have an alternative to follow. Do you know a lot of stories where a person dedicated everything, all their uh, energy, time, everything, to something that they love? No, we don't see those stories. What we see, what we think, what we are afraid, and this is a distortion. Is that, if I do what I love, I'm going to do nothing, because what I love is to do nothing. But that's not true. We Another paradigm that we subscribe to is that people are lazy and stupid. But that's not true. We're not lazy and stupid. We're just overworked, exhausted, confused, wounded. That's why we have no idea. You think that if you did what you love to do, you would just lay in bed. No, you would sleep for 1 week. You would get that exhaustion out of your system. And then you wake up one morning and think, oh my God, I'm so bored. Let me do something. And that's who we are. We're just told that we are not. We're told not to trust ourselves. And
Hmm.
naturally, we don't know who we even are.
How do you think we could get more to trusting ourselves instead of seeking like the answers from somebody else or all the solutions outside of us? Because again, like as you talked about marketing, everything is about like telling you what you need. You need more of this. Instead, how about like looking within, like, do I really need that? So how do we develop that self-trust?
Trust takes time and patience. With a human, another human, if you meet someone and you like that person, it takes time before you can trust the person, no matter how much you like them initially. So the same, if you have unlearned to trust yourself, it will take time. What you do is that you take small decisions. Initially, take decisions that you dare to take. Take small decisions, no matter what, but take decisions. Be decisive, and then just remind yourself that it's okay to trust yourself. It feels scary, but in the end, when you start hearing yourself, that voice, and when you start trusting your own choices, you will suddenly realize that you do have all the truth. And that doesn't mean that you will never regret your choices, but it's very different. If you regret your own choice because you made a decision based on, whatever circumstances were then, whoever you were, versus you regret something that you did because the society pushed you to do that.
Hmm.
I studied public administration. This is something such a ridiculous field of study. I never worked. No, I did work in that field, but I made this decision myself. I called it upon myself. I have no one to blame, and I'm at peace with that.
Yeah.
But if my parents had forced me to do something, then that resentment would stay with me for the rest of my life. We don't, we sometimes think that to trust yourself, you have to be always right. No, you won't be always right. It's not about being right. It's about being okay with making mistakes.
Yeah. I love that. Absolutely. And talking about, so your book, Becoming Flawesome, I want to touch on this a little bit. Of course, everything we're talking about is in your book and the topics in your book. But Becoming Flawesome, what does Flawesome mean? As you said, this word came to you, but if you could kind of explain so people know the meaning behind it, and then what does it mean to become Flawesome?
So the word came to me because it came after the manuscript was finished. So we had to infuse it here and there in the book, so that you won't even find um, the explanation what it means. But my interpretation of Flawesome is being flawed and awesome at the same time. So that's if we stick to the etymology of the word. Now, what it means is that recognizing that you are imperfect, and this is what makes you valuable and beautiful, your imperfection.
I think everybody needs to be reminded that. That's why everybody needs to read this book. And one of the things in the book, towards the end, I was noticing you talking about emotional well-being, and you said this is the path back that starts with emotional well-being. So, can you explain what emotional well-being means? So, again, like if after people jump off this interview, how could we really start to develop our emotional well-being? What would be some of the first steps to begin that?
So, maybe it has already come across that I'm very much into psychology. I think psychology is such a wonderful field which has a lot of answers into our lives. What I've noticed in personal growth in the past 20 something years is that very often we go into personal growth and transformation unequipped. We lack some basic skills, fundamental skills, and you've mentioned one of them, awareness. It is definitely, it's awareness is like literacy. You can't read a book unless you know the letters. So awareness is this fundamental skill for personal growth and transformation. Another fundamental skill is emotional. I call it emotional literacy, although I'm being advised to call it emotional ABCs because it's much more simple to understand. But the point is that we are a little vague about our emotional life, mostly because we are not taught that. But part of personal growth and transformation is actually having a whole range of emotions, and not all of them will be pleasant. A lot of them will be uncomfortable, no matter what they say. And part of the process is very often, you're being taken apart into pieces. You face something which you don't like. You face your own self, which you don't like. So I give emotional literacy or emotional ABC as the toolkit that you will need for personal growth and transformation. Because if I don't give it to my readers, I won't be able to take them deeper into such topics as being honest with yourself, as having courage, as being kind to yourself. So this is just a very necessary toolkit, and I believe that it's not just for the context of being also a flawesome or being authentic or being true to yourself. It's something which you will need anywhere in life, because we always feel emotions. We're just not always aware of them.
Absolutely. And I know you also walk through in the book how to, as you were saying, we all experience uncomfortable emotions. And I think, again, if we don't sit with that and learn to accept what we are experiencing and instead turning away from it and not acknowledging it, that's where it will always come up again. And so I know you walk through in the book basically a quick path to feel our emotions, name it, accept it, and then release it. And I think all of us need to kind of, again, with practice, we could continually work on that so that we get better at processing our emotions. And I think that's an important piece. If you could walk through it, I think it's 6 steps, 5 steps to.
It's seven, and I hope I don't butcher them because I don't
That's
have
okay.
them in front of my eyes right now.
That's
So
okay.
I might give them in a slightly different order. So one of them is actually noticing the emotions. As I said, very often we live in this emotional soup, and we only notice emotions which are very intense. Uh, and but sometimes, if you catch yourself not feeling anything and you ask yourself, what do you feel, you would be able to give it a name to that emotion. Just as maybe a little dramatic example, if you feel apathy, for example, apathy very often is the first symptom of falling into depression.
Mm.
So even such meek and vague emotions are important. So it's important to notice them. So the first step is notice. The second step is, and here I sometimes give it one way, sometimes the other way, is
Okay.
name it. And if I were to ask people to write down all the emotions that they know right now on the spot, they would probably actually come up with maybe up to 50 emotions. But I can tell you that there are a few hundred. So at least you could go 300 and over just in English language. So the second
Mhm.
one is name it, because when you name an emotion, when you are a little bit more familiar with emotions, it's easier to work with them. So that you can classify emotions in all sorts of different ways, and in terms of, let's say, anger, fear, sadness, and so on and so on. And they have different facets to them. Like anger, there's rage, there's frustration, all sorts of different facets, and also in terms of intensity. So the second step is actually becoming a little bit more nuanced with your emotions, understanding, and then locating them in your body. And here I would have to give the full context about why we locate emotions in the body. Usually it's the physical sensation that tells you that you feel something. Let's take again a very intense emotion, terrified. when you feel terrified, like you go on stage and you feel almost like paralyzed with fear, you usually know that you feel that because either your legs are weak, your stomach is turning, you may even, you may even throw up. So emotions actually express themselves in your body. That's how we know that we feel them. And it's important to locate it in your body and to understand, again, this is a physical understanding of your emotions. Then I usually suggest that people do a little bit of a diagnosis. Oh, actually, accepting. I would call it number four, and that's something which is hard for people who are passionate in personal growth and transformation. Very often, we don't want to accept emotion. Probably acceptance should be coming after recognizing that you're feeling something
Mm.
before you even name it. Because what we do is that if you feel icky about some person, sometimes you refuse to say that I don't like this person for no reason. Antipathy, right? You would say that, oh, you know. You might refer to justice or whitewash it, like I don't like how this person is doing this or that, or maybe I'm concerned. So rather than accepting unsavory emotion, we very often whitewash it or we give it a different name just not to accept it. So acceptance is definitely an important part of this process. Now, when you've recognized that you have emotion, accepted it, named it, located it in your body, then the next step is actually to have this diagnostics. So again, I'm doing it without the
That's
context
okay.
where I explain why it's important. But you would usually, you feel emotion for a reason. It's a reaction to something in the outside world, or maybe to the way you react to the outside world. So it's a very important moment to ask yourself, why am I feeling what am I feeling? What is it telling me about me? And of course, it's connected to you accepting the emotion. For example, I feel I don't like this person. And yes, it's unsavory emotion, but what is it telling me about me?
Mm.
Why is this person triggering me?
Mm.
It's in a way, it's turning the mirror around and looking at yourself, that whatever you're feeling about the world is actually something about you. And then after that, I invite people, so this will be number six, to relax physically. And that's a very interesting phenomenon. As I said already, the emotions express themselves in your body physically. So usually when you relax physically, you feel less of an emotion. A very, very simple connection analogy would be, you can go to sleep really nervous. When you have had your sleep, you wake up, you feel a little better. Because when you
Absolutely.
relax physically, all your emotions subside. So relaxing physically is an important step. And here you can use breath, you can use meditation, you can use affirmations, you can tell it, you can give a command to your body, relax, let go. It's your body responds to that. And then after that, you're ready to release the emotion. And again, if I were to give the full context, emotion has a message. Usually, if you've heard the message, if you've worked through that emotion, it's free to go. It has no
Mm.
reasons to stick with you. That's why you have to do all those steps before you just say, okay, I'm done with you. You've taught me the lesson. You're free to move on. That was
Yeah.
a very quick
No, you
run
went
through.
through it very quickly too, but again, this is in the book so people could really go deep into it so you could understand as you explained it very well, but it's kind of like grief. It's like you
Yeah.
must go through the steps to then fully release it. Again, this is emotion, so it's the same thing walking through grief. And I think I know my first, I don't know if it was my first experience of grief, but my first awareness of going through a grieving process where I noticed and I let myself go through all the stages, it I was able to release it. And of course there was waves of that emotion, but eventually the cycle completed. And so I do think it's an important process when we know how to go through the steps. So thank you for sharing that. Well, there's so much in your book and there's so many more topics we could go into. And this is really, again, you know, the path back to ourselves is that's ultimately what your book is about and everything that you're explaining today. And it's, of course, the work we all need to do. Because I think without even knowing, I think a lot of people are disconnected from their true self, or there's a part of them that they reject or shame away. And I think when we get more grounded in who we are and accept who we are, then we can become the next version we wish to be. And so that's really, so everything you shared in your book and what I've listened to so far is so beautiful. And thank you for everything you shared today, of course. So I just want to ask you my last question, and then of course we'll share everywhere people could find you. So if you were to share a piece of wisdom, a life lesson that you've learned on your vast journey, and you feel it's something you need to shout out to the world today, what would that piece of wisdom be and why?
So my favorite piece of wisdom comes from a movie, Cinderella from 2005, from Cinderella's mom. These were her last words to her daughter, and she said, "Have courage and be kind." And I think that's one of the best advices I've ever heard in my 20 something years in personal growth.
That's remarkable. I love that. And why does that line in particular really shout out to you?
I think that's the juice of life, because you really have to have courage. Otherwise you will just stagnate. It's Everything requires a little bit of courage. Courage, that's the definition of courage, when you're doing something new, something you're not familiar with, because the moment you're familiar, you're not afraid of it. So courage is important for you to be able to move, but courage without kindness is it can and probably not just courage, but kindness is that one piece which I think world doesn't value enough. We are enamored with the idea of love, and we think that love will save the world, but love is such a complex emotion to master. Think of your love for yourself.
Hmm.
It's sometimes so hard. We in abstract terms, yes, I love everyone, but then once you get to that one person who hurt you, or to that one jerk or one moron, like
Yeah.
if you get to particulars, it just becomes so much more complicated. And kindness is this one force which makes everything so much more beautiful, because it doesn't, you can be kind to people who have hurt you. You can be kind to people that you don't agree with. You can be kind to people who you don't want in your life. You can treat the world with kindness without having to accept it, agree with it, like it. You can still be kind. And that's something which I think the world lacks.
I actually really resonate with that because my partner, he always says that too, is like, you don't have to like her, you don't have to love her, but you do have to be kind.
Yes,
It is
I
really,
agree.
yeah, I think that's such a beautiful message. And I think that if people take that on, that would change the world. Is exactly like we could choose to be kind. Like it doesn't take much to just be kind. Loving,
Yes.
that's complex, like you said, but yes. So beautiful, Kristina. So where could people best find you? Of course, I know your book is available everywhere. It will be plugged in the show notes for you to grab it. Where can people find you?
So my handle everywhere is Kristina Mand, Kristina with a K. It's Estonian way of writing it. Mand is my family name, and it's a handle everywhere. Or in Mindvalley, of course. I'm a co-founder of Mindvalley. You'll see me there.
Yes. Yes. And what are some of your programs that people should dive into on Mindvalley?
So
What
on
would be
Mindvalley, in the memberships, for those who know Mindvalley, for those who don't know, I'll be speaking Chinese right now. We have membership, and it has membership has two of my older programs, which are, one of them is on happiness, the other one is called Live by Own Rules. But my newest programs are not part of Mindvalley membership right now, because they are on Mindvalley platform, because they're tied to my book. And my two newest programs are called 10 Questions for Self-Love and From Awesome to Flawesome. They're tied to the book, but they're built in a way that you can, read the book and do the programs, and they're not repetitive.
amazing. So that program is available for anybody.
So these programs are not on Mindvalley membership. They
Oh,
are
okay.
usually, if you buy my book, there will be a way to
Perfect.
add the programs. Yeah. Depends.
Perfect.
I mean, if you buy that on Amazon or from the bookshelf somewhere in Barnes and Noble, then no, you would
But
have to probably
but
scan
I'm
the.
gonna
Yeah.
yeah, no problem. Well, I'm gonna plug in the show notes your website where people could find that and then grab
Yeah.
your course as well.
Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much.
you. No, thank you so much, Kristina. This has been lovely, and I just thank you for sharing your heart and your vulnerability, and helping people really return home to themselves. This work is so important, and thank you for being so real and honest and showing up as your authentic self as well. I appreciate you. Thank you for
Thank you so
calling
much.
from
Yeah.
Estonia as well, making the time. So great chatting.